Dear participants, I'm very glad to be with you this afternoon, afternoon in Athens, and late evening perhaps in India, Afghanistan, and the East, and early morning in the States. Thank you for being with us. We will try to compensate your presentation at the end of the day with this round table, where we are about to discuss an issue that I suppose that everybody has came across it, talking about the risk of risk assessments and the biases and the absence of objective failure data across the industries. I'm very pleased to have very distinguished professionals with us today. Ioannis Dokas, Associate Professor of Democritus University of Thrace. Theodoros Kraniotis, a person who is dealing, I know him for over 20 years now, and is dealing with risk assessment all his life, I would say, and not only this, and not only qualitative, but also quantitative ones. We have also Panos Kouderis, the agency coordinator of TAP operations, coming from the construction phase, so being involved with design, construction, and operation. And finally, also with us is Nikos Andreadis, who is the HR and human factors manager in a maritime consulting company. So will give us some flavor from sea and how risk assessment is perceived on sea. Thank you all for being with us. It was a very short presentation, but I don't want to take more time for that. Everyone can give some more information about his career, and along with this can make a statement on how each one is perceiving this matter. Let me start with Ioannis Dokas, because all we start from the education phase. We are all engineers, if I'm not wrong here, and I believe most of the people who participate in this event this time are engineers, more or less. So, Yannis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, George. Thank you, everybody. I'm an associate professor at System Safety Engineering at Democritus University of Thrace. I am mainly using systemic models of accident causation, and especially the system theoretic accident model processes technique. So in relation to the subject of the round table, risk assessment is a tool that is widely used in every industry. It is one of the basic tools that we're utilizing to identify the hazard and provide the hierarchy of hazards, and to assess what could go wrong and what causes all these, and to identify the contributing factors to accidents. In relation to what are the risks in this process of developing risk assessment, some points that needs to be considered is, of course, the quality of data. One thing that definitely needs to be collected are the data, and in some occasions, data are not up to date. In some occasions, depending on the nature of the hazard that we are trying to investigate and look at more thoroughly, data cannot be retrieved, measured data. So in that cases, one solution is to utilize the expert judgment or the judgment of the people who are working at that process. This, however, brings into consideration some biases that can affect the judgment of the experts. There are many factors in relation to this. I think Nikos Andreadis, who is the expert in human factors, can provide a list of such biases that can affect the perception of the occurrence of specific events, given some psychological and previous experiences. So I will not provide details on that. The other thing that we need to consider is the methodology. Now, as we know, there are many methodologies that can be used to assess the hazards and assess the risk in a process. It is good to have awareness of the strong points and the weak points of each method, and depending on the nature of the system that we are looking at and investigating, to choose wisely the method that best fits to the need. Personally, I would like to highlight the issue of independence of events. All right, this is something that personally I consider of importance in assessing risks. For instance, in many hazard analysis and risk assessment, we consider the probabilities of events as independent. We consider the events as independent to another. Thus, when we're using probabilities, we are making typically the assumption that these events are independent. Unfortunately, in reality, this is not the case. Right? So, utilizing probability without investigating the independence of the events is an issue and can affect the final result of our analysis, making it either higher risk or lower risk, depending on the type of dependency that the event has between them. So this is our first round from my part, and I'm waiting for the rest of the group to provide their inputs, and then we can discuss further. George, you are mute.
You're right. Thank you, Yanis, for that. Very good. And giving a good ground for discussion. Theodoros.
Yes, George, thank you. As George says, I'm working with risk assessment almost more than 20 years. As a chemical engineer, I have been engaged in both qualitative and quantitative risk assessment in almost every kind of workplaces and activities and projects. What I would like to highlight regarding the risks that we face in a risk assessment procedure is to have clearly defined what is our objective. One of the questions that we are doing to the user is what you want to do with the risk assessment. It's very critical to understand what the client, the user wants to do with the risk assessment. Maybe it is an investment decision. So we have to go in a high level and apply a different methodology as Yanis discussed, different methodology according to the result we want to reach. Maybe it is a process redesign or update. Maybe it is a work procedure that we need to clarify and make it better than it is. Maybe it is a workplace reconstruction. So according to the objective that we have for our risk assessment, we have to decide what is the proper methodology, what are the people, who are the people that need to be engaged in order to have the result that we need, what will be the level of detail that we need to extend and record our findings in order to present it and communicate it internally or even externally to an authority or a third party or certification body, whatever it is interesting on our risk assessment. So one very critical question and a risk, if it is not answered correctly in the beginning, is what we want to do with the risk assessment. If we have a clear picture and objective what we want to do, then we can design and plan our activities and tasks in order to reach the outcome that we want. So this is my initial input on our discussion, and I'm waiting to hear also the other participants.
Theodoros, I think you put a lot of questions or a big area, spectrum of issues to be discussed. But I do believe that most of us came across this once or more times in our working life. Perhaps planners who had to practice this, particularly during construction, but also during the operation, involving also other entities, subcontractors during the operation phase and subcontractors, may light a little bit further this process of what do I need the risk assessment for?
Thank you, George, for the nice pass. I would like to thank you for the invitation to participate on that panel. And very quickly, I would like to share and the experience that we had during the construction phase, but also before that, some general remarks on the subject. So the risk assessment work requires a good judgment, if we could say, in brackets. That is a judgment which is well informed, balanced, reasoned, and critical, avoiding bias and discrimination. The exercise of this judgment involves the ways which people, or the methodology that people are using to integrate multiple probable potential conflicting cues to arrive to an understanding of a situation. This is a very complex process and involves us recognizing and managing uncertainty. In most of the cases, this is what we have dealt with. And in understanding and balancing different and potentially competing also the outcomes. So bias is something that I think that in the risk assessment is something that all the companies have suffered of. And the importance of the risk assessment is something probably that it has lost the value that it had in the past. It is just a paper, or it is a study of some persons or of an organization in order to protect the employees. At the beginning of the construction phase, and coming to some examples, I remember that most of the workers didn't know what is a risk assessment and didn't know what is written inside. So when TAP decided, or the contractors decided to transfer that info with the workforce, then we realized what was written inside, it was not reflecting the actual risks or the mitigation measures that workers had to take. So one key principle here for me is the involvement of those that are doing a job, because they are facing the risks. They know how, in some cases, they know even how to mitigate them better than engineers. And their involvement and their participation on developing or updating a risk assessment is very critical. And I'm referring to updating because we can see, and if you're a client and you're running tenders and you have contractors that are, or bidders that are participating in the tender, and you are asking them, provide us your risk assessment procedure, you will see that the risk assessment procedure is probably dated in 2017 or 2016 or 2001, which means that in some case we tick the box with the risk assessment management procedure that we had to do for an ISO certificate or for a requirement for a client or something else, but not entering on a gradual improval process of this risk assessment. It has to do always who has prepared that risk assessment. We are facing in Greece or maybe in other countries, and it is I have to say here that management force is not following that principle that other companies, whenever you're a contractor and you're asking a risk assessment, they are giving you a document of 100 or 150 pages, which is covering all the risks that any company could suffer and could face, and mitigation measures that probably are not reflecting with what you have in place and or what you would like to have in place. And this is a heavy document that no one is aware of except the person that is signing it, if he is signing it. So it is becoming a non-important or non-used document. So I think that it has to do also with the who is taking the lead in order to prepare something, a risk assessment, but then this risk assessment, it should be a draft that it will be communicated with those that they will actually do the job. And vice versa, when you have contractors that are coming on site in order to work for you, and you are the client that owns the facilities and owns the risks of the facilities, and you have prepared your own facility risk assessments or risk assessments, you are responsible to review all the contractors or subcontractors risk assessments and not just tick the box that the contractor has them, because all of them need to be adapted in the working environment. So for me, the questions that I would like to raise on the table and to conclude my speech is this, what could be the causes at the end of that biases, and how we could control them? Thank you, George. The floor back to you.
Thank you, Panagiotis. I think you make it more complicated. You add more parameters. And now I need the help of Nikos. I'm very pleased he's with us to give an approach from the human resources, human factors, protocols manager. Well, I understand that maybe at sea may face some additional challenges or different challenges, but as overall, the approach will not vary dramatically. Nikos.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. I will try to not overcomplicate things. The predecessors, they stated their concerns and major problems regarding risk assessment. I'm coming from a heavily regulated industry. The maritime industry has a lot of regulations, a lot of procedures. They are very sophisticated, and we are proud that at least in the books, in the papers, we are very, very good. Now, one of the biggest questions and one of the challenges that we face on this very high risk environment, the SIP, which is very high risk environment, is at the end of the day, do people do risk assessments at the end of the day, or it's just a paperwork? From our experience, we know that there's a high percentage of people that at the end of the day, they just don't do it. I think we are discussing about something and how we can make it better and how we can solve problems and make it more efficient. And at the end of the day, I don't know if this can be generalized in the land, but which I think it's probably generalized in the land as well. But most of the people, they don't do it. It's just a paperwork. They just do it to be compliant. They just do it in order to have a tick in the box, like I think Panos have just mentioned. Now, in the cases of people that they actually try to do it, there are other challenges that I will try to put in the table from my perspective, just to make a short introduction about me. I have a human factors background from psychology. I have a PhD and a postdoc in human performance analysis, and I'm focused on task performance and error and efficiency as the core of my studies. So risk management is a highly anxiogenic process. So imagine that if we have somebody who is motivated and engaged and they really want to do a risk assessment, imagine how much stress we put on them or they have in their minds, because they have to predict essentially something that in part is completely unpredictable. environments are dynamic, conditions are dynamic. We are actually talking about something that is essentially chaotic. We can have parameters and we can have systems and they work and they have minimized the risk to a great extent, and we should utilize them further, of course. However, there is a great portion of the environment that we cannot control. And that, based on that, I would like to raise the second question. Now, essentially, we have three steps. First, how we will convince people and how we will facilitate and motivate people and help them actually perform risk assessments. So this is, for me, is step one. Now, step two is how we will help them actually perform these risk assessments, reducing the stress, reducing the obligation, the responsibility they might feel, which leads to certain biases when they perform risk assessment. How we will train them to reduce, for example, optimism, planning fallacy, anchoring, ambiguity effects, and stuff like that. This is the second, I think, stage. And the third one, which it's a very, very big topic, is should we just limit the critical thinking of people on something that is a checklist and is pre-structured, or we should make their minds give a certain degree of freedom and introduce the concept of foresight and how people can use their training and their mind to make, let's say, an additional assessment and evaluation of risks that cannot be quantified or cannot be put down in heavy checklists. This is my latter point. I don't want to express my opinion on this last part, but I would like to introduce these three, let's say, major challenges in the whole discussion.
Thank you, Nikos. Thank you. From what we heard till now, I understand that the major issue is what we want the risk assessment for. I think you all agreed that in some cases, or in many cases, it's just a paper compliance issue, perhaps, to just demonstrate I comply with the rules, so tick the box, that's it. And the question here is, having an accident, how good can you support your case with a risk assessment which is just a paper? Theo, Theodore?
I think it's very difficult to do that. I think what we have to understand, and let's say we are missing in a lot of cases, is that a risk assessment is not a single document. A risk assessment is a combination of the overall risk assessment is a combination of different processes and procedures inside an organization that finally ensure the prevention of accidents. And I will give an example that Panagiotis discussed in his presentation in the morning regarding the permit to work procedure. So typically, Panagiotis have in their organization 3 levels of permits. So practically, they have made an assessment of risk, an evaluation of activities and their risk, and they allocate a different process to control the risks due to the different characteristics. So this process that Panagiotis, the permitting work process, is a risk assessment process. So in a first level, they make an evaluation of what are the high risk activities, and at the second level, they apply procedures to control them. So if we just want to comply, let's say, with the regulation, yes, we can make a very huge package of worksheets and tables and present everything in there. I can remember a lot of end users discussing to me, I want a risk assessment that will cover all legal issues and will be and will comply with the law. This cannot be, let's say, recording and produced. It's huge. It's let's say, let's make a copy of the legislation to another risk assessment. So risk assessment need to be, as I said before, we need to know what we want to do and how we want to succeed to our target. We want to say to people how they will do the task in a safe manner. We have to go in the level of employees. We have to design our workplace how to be safe. We will go in another level. We will design them safeguards and the controls that we need, and we will put them in place. And we will make sure that these controls are maintained and are in place whenever they are needed. It's not a single process. It's a combination of documents, activities, and if we have an incident, we will have to present in order to prevent it and in order to control the risk. I have made 1, 2, 3, 4 these controls in place.
Thank you, Theodoros. Yanis, I remember it was you who proposed this topic, and right. So if we go to the data collection, right, make a risk assessment. One are familiar with likelihood, severity, maybe exposure, or other things. But when we come to likelihood, sometimes I wonder, all right, we have working at heights, right? And I know what will happen if somebody will fall from height, but how likely is that? So if I go 1 to 5, what should I put? If I go to a plant and we have machinery without guards, okay, what should I put? 1, 2, 3, 5, the likelihood, the severity. Yes, I know what would happen. So how do you approach this matter from the data collection? So accuracy of the data and data that can support the final judgment, because you spoke before about the expert's judgment. So it's not just data.
Yeah, sure. Well, you are true. I propose that subject as a round table because doing a good work to produce a risk assessment require managing many things, and we just mention few of them here in this panel. All right. And definitely you need many people involved. What I would like to highlight here is the availability of data, as you mentioned, George. And in this case, what I would suggest is to utilize just qualitative data, not you can utilize techniques that are actually write specifications and provide some assessment in words. You can use some tools that in science, which is called possibility theory, not probabilities. You can utilize maybe some fuzzy numbers where you can mitigate the problem. But the most important thing from my perspective it is that the risk assessment approach is a continuous approach. It's not just a document if you're going to make it correctly. And ideally, you should have a safety management system in place that actually continuously updates and continually looking at the hazard assessments and the risk assessment that you are doing. Panagiotis mentioned something very interesting, and I kept it in my mind that when the TAP is hiring personnel or groups, to do some work for them, they are looking at the hazard assessment, the risk assessment, and they're noticing that this risk assessment that haven't been updated for years. Right? This is an indication of the culture. So if you have such a culture in one organization, probably you will not expect to have up-to-date data in several aspects of their process of work. Now, very correctly, you said very correctly, George, that there are some, let's say, contributing factors to risk and to accidents actually cannot be measured. All right, you can easily measure some physical properties, like, for instance, the noise. Okay, but how about the human error? How about the software error? All right, I haven't heard anything about software errors in this panel. How you can calculate the probability of a software to produce something wrong? Okay, so this is big challenging here, and for that reason, there are some new tools in the safety science literature, and the scientists are proposing some tools to conduct risk and hazard assessment, okay, which are utilizing new approaches and mainly possibility theory, or even not even just providing words instead of numbers, okay, and design the controls in order to ensure that the process could be conducted without any problems in phrases, not numbers. So these are some new tools that we're trying to expand and we try to improve, which are not too young actually. They have been in the scientific community since the mid of 2000s, 2005, 2004, but now have matured significantly. And little by little, we will see them in the mainstream industry. In relation to this, I would like to share to you an experience that I have in a conference after Fukushima accident, where I met with some people from a big industry that are designing and developing trains. Okay, these experts told to me in the break of the conference that, listen, we're doing a risk assessment utilizing the traditional tools that actually are required by the regulations, but in-house, we are conducting an internal risk assessment with brand new tools in order to ensure that we will produce a high quality product to our customers. All right, this is something to do with what Theodoros mentioned previously, that, and I think Nikos, that the legislation requires specific things, but if you want to do a good job, you will do. You will find the solution to do as good risk assessment as good as the data and the expertise allows you to do that. What I like to highlight here is that there are some new tools out there which could provide, a more realistic assessment of the risk that we are facing, and not just numbers that may be, false and provide, false indication of safety in our functions, in our procedures.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I would like to keep from what you said mostly is that risk assessment is a live document. And you mentioned Fukushima. We can mention the Grenfell Tower fire, and then new legislation coming out. So in fact, the new legislation is based on a risk assessment. So indeed is a live document. Right. Nikos, would you like to add something on that?
I have a human perspective approach, and
Yes.
again, I would like to say that until the risk assessment becomes, if it ever becomes, but I believe it becomes fully automated, it will be implemented by human beings. So I think we need to go one step behind, and try to see how we can make people implement whatever tool we design in the most efficient manner. Sometimes I have seen that it's better to provide, let's say, a less efficient, from our perspective, tool, but something that people can implement even if that covers, let's say, 60 or 70% of our expectations, than to give them a tool that covers 90 and 95% of our expectations, and they never use it because it's too complicated for them. So I think we should sometimes, we are all scientists here, and I believe we face the same problem sometimes. We study too much and we lose the connection with the front line. So personally, I try to engage with the front line as much as possible, be along them, try to see how they think, the challenges, how I can train them to minimize error and risk, how I can convince them and help them think in systems, parameters, and stuff like that. And when I raise the awareness, I have seen that they are more eager and more motivated to implement tools, complicated tools like risk assessment procedure and relevant checklists and forms.
Okay. So I think we can go back to the initial discussion about what we need the risk assessment for, and who should be involved with. I think that you have all of you touched this matter, okay? And is somebody who would like to add something on that? If we don't want the risk assessment to be just paper, and sometimes well, talking to our clients, I keep saying that the risk assessment with just a paper could be a trap for you if somebody would go wrong, if you have an accident. And then again, you have spent money on that and you don't have any benefit out of this. So you spend whatever, 10 euro, but then what you get back is 2 euros. So you lose 8. But if you spend 40 euro and you make 100 euro out of this, then you have a profit of 60 euro. Okay, I understand that there are more concrete expenditures and invoiceable amounts, and that there are some a little bit probabilistic ones, but this is an exercise to make. So going back to risk assessment, Theo approached this matter like in circles, going to the employees, going to the installation, going to the society, perhaps. So, Panos, why you develop risk assessment in TAP?
Before answering that question, just one comment on what the predecessor said. Because the risk assessment is like a way of life. I think that all of the human beings are doing it. When you are crossing a road, you're making a risk assessment. When you are doing some very simple things in your life, you are doing a risk assessment. So what I want to say with that is that it's a process that is familiar with most of the people because they are doing it daily and in several aspects of their life. So I think that there is a cultivated environment in order to discuss more and elaborate more on the risk assessment. Now, why we are doing a risk assessment? First of all, of course, it is a compliance, a legal compliance that you need to fulfill, definitely. And it is good that it is a legal compliance. In the countries that is not a legal compliance, it should be. But first of all, is because of being able to identify all the potential hazards that we have in our facilities and within our scope, and all the mitigation measures that we can take in order to avoid any incident on environment, health, or safety. This is the main purpose of the risk assessment. And that is what we are trying to do.
May I say something here?
Please, Nikos.
Panagiotis, you said that it's part of the human nature, and that's correct. But you know, there's two sides on that coin. It can backfire. For example, if you have an experienced captain or an experienced chief engineer that they are sailing for 20 years, they think that they can estimate the potential risks based on the past, this advice. So they are very confident, and they somehow they feel that they do not need the procedure because they are already doing it very well, which we both know, and all here we know that this is a very bad approach. This is not the way it works. So it's part of the human nature, and we have an open door there to help to train people, but sometimes you have to convince them that they need it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have you experience the same things as we experience in shipping. I think humans are the same.
I agree. George, if I may,
Yes,
just
please.
a short comment. In my experience, in my short experience, I can tell you that any incident investigation that I have done has led that the root cause is not the human error, but the management or the organization. That something has not been done properly that led to the immediate cause, which is that the human did a mistake. Either it was not retrained, refreshed, updated with new regulations, etc. So what I want to say here is that you need a top-down approach. You need the real involvement. I think that what is not working with the employees, with all of us, is when the management will say to us, this is what you are going to do, without explaining why and how we can use the benefits of that management is saying to us. If there is a correct communication of what is inside this document, give it also to the workforce with for reviewing it, giving it in order to make it their own. This will help them. I think this is what personally I have experienced, that whenever this went down and it was evaluated, assessed, and improved by the workforce, then this was its own baby, if I can use that word, that helped them to use it in everyday work that they were doing. This is my personal experience. Maybe I'm romantic.
Well, you have a good base on that. Nikos, I know you have a commitment. I don't know if you have more time to stay. If not, thank you very much.
I have a couple of minutes, but thank you. I will, in a couple of minutes, I will have to go. So
All right.
thank everyone.
Can I ask you a question then before you go?
Yes.
And take the opportunity from what Pano said. Going down to the workforce, I understand that when we're talking about descending, ascending a ladder, going down to the engines, yeah, in a ship, is a risk assessment that should involve these people using the ladder or whatsoever. But about the risk that the ship could fall into a typhoon, whom should involve in this case? Not this, let's say, workforce at a lower level. Is that correct or not? It's a different approach.
Ideally, they should not go into a typhoon because they have weather forecasts. If they
Well,
do, there's something wrong there.
All right.
They should not do it.
Mhm.
So,
But could happen.
there are a wide variety of processes.
Let me rephrase.
Yes.
When you plan a trip, then you assess what could go wrong, including typhoons. So you have to escape or whatsoever. So you come to a very higher level in doing your risk assessment in this case, or not.
The way it works is that the risk assessment is part of the whole process. I think Dr. Douglas said that, and I totally agree. Now, there's the identification of safety critical tasks. So there are tasks based on their criticality, and according to the criticality, there is a certain procedures, and the risk assessment varies. For example, for minor daily tasks, you might just need to do a toolbox meeting, but we know that it minimizes the risks. Now, what we try to do in order to, facilitate the whole risk management is to help people, the frontline people, understand what is risk what is the priority in every decision they make, and this is risk minimization. We try to use very simple concepts, and in parallel, we try to help them think in systems. Like we think, we try to make them think, like, if you do this, how this can affect the other thing and the other thing, and this can lead to a potential disaster or crisis. Now, when they understand that everything is a system, when they understand that every decision they make on board, even the funniest decision, for example, I'm saying to officers, if you don't brush your teeth in the night, during night, does this increase the risk on board? Yes or no? So I have a variety of answers, but now they are more suspicious and they say yes. And why? Then I ask, this is another part of simple training. You have to ask why, and again why. And they say, for example, if my teeth am rotten and I have a toothache, for example, I will not be able to perform my duties correctly, and this will lead probably not to have good situational awareness. And they go deep and they start thinking. Now, if they start thinking like this, and then they get back to utilize a risk assessment tool, they see that what they think now is manifested on the process, on the paper, and they understand it. And I think this cycle of training and exposure and familiarization and implementation helps people perform better on the specific area. I hope that covers your question.
Since you mentioned systems, and let's not focus only on management systems, but go in systems in generally, which could be systems of components of an equipment or new technology. Right. So go to Yanis. Yanis, give us.
I will have to go. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Nikos. Thank you.
Nikos, thanks.
You know, the subject is unlimited, so we can stay here overnight, even if everybody has left. Okay, but it is recorded, so you can, when will be shared the link, you can see the rest of the round table. Thank you, Nikos.
Thank you very much.
So, Yanis, back to you.
Yes.
Go to systems now.
Well, what I would like to say, because I also need to leave, they are calling me to go to my class. Safety is a control problem, okay? And it's an extremely difficult thing to manage. And the key thing in safety is complexity. The complexity of our system increases rapidly, and we need to identify, methods and tools in order to allow us to navigate this complexity first, to navigate it, and second, to control the behavior of the components, as you said, and not only the components. And because safety emerges as it is an emergent property of system, we must control several aspects of the subsystem in order to have a safe behavior in total. All right, this is an extremely difficult thing. I do not know how many people can comprehend that. The tools that we are using, they are capable of catching the complexities up to a point. And that's good. It's better to have a good image of some aspect of reality than have no image of the aspects of the reality. And another thing that I would like to highlight is the nature of the system. There are different systems. For instance, there are systems that have no humans in it. There are no humans in it. What are you doing there? So no human factors that, but what you need to have is an engineering procedure that actually understands the behavior of computers, because the computers can control the behavior of the unmanned system. All right. So the aspect, the risk assessment is of importance. I only hope those who are heavily depend on safety in their businesses to comprehend how useful this tool is. And the second thing is that it is not easy to perform a good risk assessment, but it's good to have a risk assessment of as much as possible good degree of, let's say, completeness. Okay. And as you said, George, several times when you are talking, okay, the culture of the organization defines the majority of the systems and some systems and how this will behave and to what extent each organization will do a good risk assessment approach. All right, because safety, as you very correctly said many times, safety is a value of the organization. Okay, and that reflects to every component of the safety management system, including the tools of risk assessment. Okay.
So I try somehow to summarize and give some, say, key points. I understand that from what you have all said, that it's important to define the scope, the purpose. A risk assessment is a live document, is definitely not one's work. Would you like to add something to that, Theo, Panos, Yannis?
I just want to highlight the living document, the living process. It's a continuous, it's part of the continuous improvement process of an organization. Even if we make a quantified risk assessment, new failure data are coming up. So we have to review and make a new calculation. If it is a qualitative approach, we gain from experience, from incidents, from near misses. So we have to review again and check if it's everything okay. This is very important. It is a living process and a critical process for the continuous improvement of safety.
Thank you. Panos?
One last comment from me. I think that in order to be able to unclear this uncertainty that there is when you are developing the risk assessment, you need data. So we need data, as much data as we can. So I think in Greece, it's quite important somehow to advertise that the companies should cooperate on the health and safety environmental matter by sharing lessons learned, by sharing incidents between the industries. Maybe at the beginning, for example, there is the IPLOCA. The IPLOCA is the International Pipeline Organization, or the companies that are constructing pipelines. Most of the companies are participating there, and they have a platform of sharing incident, good practices, innovations that they have done. And with that way, you are pushing the entire market and the entire industry to work on that goal. So I think somehow we need to create a sort of forum between, like the one that you're trying to do, but at the end to result also on lesson learned and transparency and sharing data, and not to be afraid to share data on that type of things.
That's very important. However, if we come to, let's say, a quantitative risk assessment, there are databases we use for this, and these databases are often updated, revised, modified. When we come to, say, more occupational safety, saying that we share the lessons learned, do you mean that having these lessons learned or incidents reporting will give us more concrete data to choose what is the likelihood, or we let those involved to be more aware and, say, increase their expertise in a qualitative way?
The second, of course.
Okay, good. That's clear then. All right. Yannis,
Need
we started
to leave.
from you.
I
You
need to leave.
right? We started from you, so you finish.
So what I
Anything?
would like to say, I really enjoyed discussing all these aspects. You know, risk assessment is indeed extremely useful, but quite challenging task in several aspects. And I think we highlighted several of them quite successfully. The most important thing is, in my opinion, is to, let's say, have safety in top priority in everybody's mind. Okay, because it's not just the management, of course, of the organization has a significant role to play on that, but also the middle and the lower levels of the organization need to comprehend that. And one way to comprehend how important safety is what Panagiotis said previously, that it is very important to shift, to allow the people in the low levels of the organization to review a little bit of the document and make them on their own. Okay, this is a good strategy, and I think in several occasions have succeeded. All right.
Okay,
So sorry, I need to
you.
leave. Okay, my students are waiting
Well,
me. So take
we are
care.
we are
Have a good
finishing
night.
now, Yanis. We are
Goodbye,
finishing.
Yanis.
Thank you all. Thank you for those who stayed with us, and I'm glad from the statistics, accurate data, to see that only 12% has left from those started to attend, to participate in this roundtable. So I think being that late and being already 10 minutes later than the program, I would like to thank you all staying with us. Thank you, Theodore. Thank you,
George.
Panos. And
Thank
the
you.
organizers, of course, George Peppers. Thank you very much for your work and the support of the event. And see you tomorrow then. All right. Have a nice evening or have
You
a nice
too.
day.
Good evening to all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.